You're listening to episode 16 of A Whole New You podcast. On today's show, I'm interviewing Chanelle Neilson, host of the Moms Who Know podcast. We discuss the importance of a morning routine. Chanelle gives us tips and meaningful advice on how to best create a routine that works well for you and your schedule. Welcome to A Whole New You podcast. I'm your co-host, Kim Maravich. I'm a registered nurse and author of the book 360 Health. I'm joined by my dear friend, Lori Biddle, a health and wellness coach certified through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Our show exists to inspire and empower women to take charge of their health with weekly tips and conversation about self-care, mindset, nutrition, fitness, and clean living. Please keep in mind that the material provided in this podcast is intended as general information only and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. We're thrilled to have you here. Let's get to the show. Welcome back, everybody. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Chanelle Neilson on the show. Chanelle Neilson, RYT, is the host and creator of the Moms Who Know podcast. She is the author of Parenting with Purpose, which has been translated into Chinese. She has worked in the fitness industry for 20 years and is a certified yoga instructor. She loves sunshine, healthy living, and dark chocolate. Chanelle is the mother of 5 kids and married to her best friend. She loves helping moms take care of themselves and grow so that they can better take care of their families. Welcome, Chanelle. Glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Now, this bio, Chanelle, is very impressive. I mean, you were so modest in saying that you authored a book, but I think you have actually penned more than just one book. Is that correct?
That is true. Yes. So as far as published books that you can buy, I have my parenting book, and then I have the first in a series of early chapter books for like the 5 to 8-year-old crowd. And that's a series that will go 6 to 10 books or so. And then I've written some other children's books and another book for moms. So, but those are not published yet. They're written and I have a publisher. It takes forever to get books actually out of your head, written. And then the process after that is even longer to get it published.
Oh, I can only imagine. But bravo to you. I mean, what a creative mind you have.
Oh, thank you.
Sure. Yes. So everybody, Chanelle and I met last year. I was on her podcast, Moms Who Know, and I just love Chanelle. And we've connected again through Instagram and on Facebook, and you have a Facebook group for your podcast as well. So that's been really great getting to reconnect with Chanelle. And recently I had read on social media that Chanelle had taught in the past a class on morning routines and how to really make those effective and to work for you. So I thought that would be a great topic to have on the podcast. And she so graciously agreed to come onto our show. So we really appreciate that. And Chanelle, just for people, just to get to know you just a little bit better, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and maybe even your podcast?
Sure. So I have 5 kids, like you mentioned. My oldest is a girl. She's 15. And then I have 4 boys. The first 4 were born in 6 years. So they're really close together. And then there's a 7-year gap. And then we, surprise, had a little baby. He's 2 years old now. We thought we were done, but it has been amazing starting over at an older age. And I was telling Kim before the call, everyone should do this. Everyone should have older kids when they have babies. It's so much easier because all my kids help. It's wonderful.
Oh, that is so amazing. Yeah, I wish, I told Chanelle I have my 3-year-old banging on the door outside of the bedroom I'm recording in right now. So I wish I had a 15-year-old, but that's wonderful.
Yes, it makes it so much easier. So that's a lot of fun. And we have a good time together as a family.
Aw. Now, how long have you been podcasting?
So I have been podcasting with the Moms Who Know podcast for the last 2 years, but I actually started podcasting about 5 years ago, and I started a podcast in China
Hmm.
through a company, and I still work for them. I currently do 2 podcasts. I do a podcast for them, and then I do my own podcast. And they had asked me to do a podcast over there, and it was on parenting. And that's how I came to write my book on parenting. The podcast was successful over in China and had, a large listenership. And they said, we think you should write a book about parenting. Mostly, I think, because they were just amazed that I had so many kids. It wasn't the quality of my motherhood, it was the quantity.
That's
They're
too
like,
funny.
wow, tell us more. How do you do this? So I wrote that book. And before it was ever published in the United States, it was published in China. So I wrote it in English. It was translated into Chinese and then sold in China. And then recently it has been published in English, and it's available just on Amazon. But that's a pretty fun thing. I have it, here where I can look at it, and I just hope they got it right, because I can't read it in Chinese, but I'm hoping it's all what I meant to say.
Yeah. You do speak a little Chinese, is that right?
I
Or you can read a
do.
little bit?
So I can't
Yeah.
read it, but I can speak
Okay.
it because
I
it's a
see.
character language. So I
Sure.
can speak it, but yeah.
That is incredible. Had you lived in China
I
at
lived
all?
in Taiwan. I was actually a
Oh.
missionary over there in my 20s,
Oh.
and so I was there for a year and a half and learned the language, most of which I've forgotten, but some of it's still there. I'm not as good at speaking
Hmm.
Chinese as I used to be.
What a wonderful background you have. And what a good experience to do that before you had kids.
Yes. Oh, it was
Mhm.
amazing. So, and it's just
Yeah.
fun to have that. The best thing about being able to speak Chinese is when I hear people. My husband is. This is another fun fact about our family. I'm 5'7", so I'm pretty average tall-ish,
Mhm.
but my husband is 6'10",
Oh
and
my.
yes, so he average doorways, just for reference, are 6'8", so he can't fit through doorways. So
Oh.
whenever we see people, they make a big deal, and that's everywhere we go. But when we see Chinese people, they think they can talk about him right in front of us, and they'll say, "Oh, ta zama gao," whatever. And that was really, if anyone's listening who can speak Chinese, my tones were really off. But anyway, they'll say he's really tall, and then I'll answer them in Chinese, and just what, it's so
Yeah.
fun when I have that opportunity. So that's the best
Ah.
part, where it comes in handy nowadays.
That is so fun. That's really cool. You're like this anomaly for the Chinese people. Not only is your husband extremely tall, but you have all these children.
Yes.
So yeah, they're probably gonna ask you to be on a reality TV
I
show.
know, right? That's hopefully the next phase. Reality. Yeah.
That's too funny. Well, Chanel, I love that you brought up also your missionary background, because I know that faith is a big part of your life as well. Um, and I think you're going to be talking about that as part of your morning routine too.
Yes.
Yeah. But speaking of, since you have taught others in the past to maximize their morning routines, before we kind of get into your morning routine, could you just tell us, sort of in general, why you think morning routines are so helpful?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start off and tell a little bit about how I got started with a morning routine. I mentioned that my kids were born close together. And for a long time there, I was just, if you have young kids, you know how this is. You're just in constant mommy mode, where everyone needs you. Everyone's, nursing on you, or laying on you, or crying for you, and it's just very constant, relentless motherhood, and it's wonderful, but it is so hard. And so for me, after several years of this without ever really having a break, I was either pregnant or nursing for about 8 years, and
Mm.
I maybe a couple months of breaks in there, but it didn't feel like long enough of a break. Anyway, I just was feeling really depleted, and what that came out as was stress and frustration. I would get frustrated with my kids. I would cry when they would cry. I would get irritated with my husband. This rising level of mom can't handle anymore. I was just
Yeah.
where I couldn't handle anymore. And in general, I'm a pretty calm person, but at that time in my life, I really wasn't. And so I decided I had been a yoga teacher in the past. And so I thought, you know what? I just need to do something for me. And so I started my morning routine was just doing yoga by myself with the door closed. No one could come in and having that time for myself. And so that's why how it began. But I feel like morning routines in general are so important because they allow us to focus on what's important to us.
Mhm.
We have so many things coming at us. And as moms, we're awesome at, multitasking and grabbing all those things that are flying at us through the air. And we can do that. But a lot of times, what we forget is to take care of ourselves. And so, morning routine is a way to literally put yourself first in the day so that everything else kind of takes place. And there's an analogy I like to share. It's an
Mhm.
object lesson. So I want you to picture like a jar. And then I want you to picture three little jars. So just a big mason jar and then three little jars next to it. And in one little jar, you've got big rocks. So only, three or four rocks fit in there. In the next little jar, you have little rocks about quarter size. So you've got several of those in the little jar. And then in the third little jar, you have sand. So tiny, tiny pebbles or sand. So back to that big mason jar, it's empty. If you put in the sand first, now the sand represents all those tiny little things. This is the diaper changes and the snacks and sweeping up after the snacks and washing hands and brushing your kids' teeth and helping them get their shoes on and helping them find their shoes, etc. All those little things that are the minutia of motherhood. If you put the sand in that jar first, it's going to fill it up about halfway. Then you take that middle jar, which had our medium-sized rocks, about quarter-size rocks, and you pour that in next. And those are the things that are, kind of important. They need to get done. We've got to feed our kids dinner, and we've got to pay the bills, and we need to drive the kids to school, and all those things that are very important and need to happen every day. We put those in, and then that fills up, say, about 2/3 of the jar. And then we take those rocks, those big rocks that are in the final little jar, and we pour those. And you know what? There's no room. It overflows. And those big rocks represent the essentials. The essentials
Mhm.
are things like taking care of yourself, building relationship with your husband, keeping that marriage relationship strong, really seeing what your kids need and what their needs are. All those really big, important things, they can fall out. They won't fit in the jar. Now, that jar is our day. But if you do that opposite and you have that empty mason jar and you put the big rocks in first, and then you put in those quarter size rocks, they're going to kind of shift around and they'll find a space. And if you put in the sand last, well, that sand just wiggles around and finds room. And that jar, everything fits. It's just a matter of which order you put it in. And another thought on that is, say a drop of sand doesn't fit. That's okay too, because the sand is not important. You got the big rocks in there. So does that make sense? I love to do that
Mhm.
in person where you can see it, but did I convey it mentally to where you could see it in your mind?
Oh, absolutely. I just love that because it makes it so tangible for us that those big rocks are the important things that are like the hallmark of our day, the hallmark of our life, and that are so important to us. And if we don't put those in first, then the rest of our day kind of goes haywire, doesn't it? So,
Exactly.
yeah, I really love that. So speaking of those big rocks, so can you give us some examples maybe in your life? What are those big rocks that you put in first
Yeah,
in
so
your day?
I have a self-care morning routine that I do every morning, non-negotiable. Now, it's long if I get the chance to make it long, but if I can't make it
Mhm.
long, I make it short, but I still do it. So,
Yeah.
what my morning routine is, so a big rock is self-care every single day, and then spending time with my husband every single day to where we connect. And if he's out of town, that means talking on the phone. If he's here, it means holding hands, sitting on the couch, spending time looking at each other, seeing each other. It can be so easy to not, hey, how was your day?
Yeah.
Hey, clean up the floor. Hey, just all that stuff, and not
Mhm.
actually connect like we want to. And then another one that's important is one-on-one time with my kids, which I do throughout the day, but I make a point of doing at bedtime when I tuck them in. So that's another kind of big rock for me. Connection are the big rocks, I think, for
Mm.
all of us. Connecting with
Yeah.
self, connecting with God, connecting with our families.
I love that. So in the morning, I know you mentioned something at bedtime, which I love that. And that's, I'm sure that's hard to do sometimes, connect with all
Yeah.
5 of your kids before bedtime. Yeah. Um, but in the morning, I know that connecting with yourself and especially connecting with God is important. So what does that look like for you in your morning?
So my morning routine goes like this. I wake up, I say my morning prayers, and then I come in the office and close the door and oh, no, I lied. First, I sit down in the you'd think I know because I would do it every morning, but I come out and I journal first thing and I just write down
Oh.
anything that's on my mind. Sometimes it's affirmations, sometimes it's goals, sometimes it's just I had a really rough night's sleep, but I'm looking forward to today. And I try to keep it positive, but just write things, sometimes what I hope will happen that day. So I journal.
Mm.
Then I
Mhm.
come in the office, I shut the door, I do yoga. I have YouTube playlist already pulled up. So all I have to
Mm.
do is hit play. And I do yoga, and then I go back out to the living room and I read scriptures, and I have a whole little mini routine that I do with scripture study, and that includes more journaling and more prayer. And then when that's done, I do writing for work usually. So whether I'm writing a new book or I need to write social media posts or whatever I need to work on to write, I get some of that writing out of the way because that is a creative time of day for me. So I do that. And then I have the same breakfast every single morning. I have Greek yogurt and a green smoothie. And then I take care of my kids. So that's my morning. That's how it goes every single morning.
Wow. Can I ask, what time do you wake up
So I
typically?
get up at 5:15. I wake up with a dawn simulator, which is
Mm.
an amazing invention, and it wakes you up with light, and it just feels
Mm.
like, oh, it's morning time, rather than that horrible blaring alarm that I used to have. So
Yes.
yes, 5:15, pretty early.
And then if you're able to do everything that you want to do during your morning routine, about how long does that take for
So
you?
that goes till about 6:45 is when I
Okay.
get up the kids. So that's about an hour and a half. Now, if I sleep in, if I am not feeling well, if we have to leave for some reason really early in the morning, I still do all those things, but I do them simplified. So I'll do 1 minute journal. Just write something really quick, maybe
Mm.
5 minutes of yoga. I read a little bit of scriptures. I don't usually journal as much if I'm in a hurry, just read some scriptures, and then I will write something really briefly. But I still keep all those elements, I just shorten them.
Mhm.
And I can get that done in like 10 minutes. If I have to, I can do that, all of it in 10 minutes.
Well, that is amazing. That really is. And I like that you don't just skip it because I think, and I want to get to your thoughts on this in a few minutes, but um, I think having little kids in the house sometimes changes because we don't always have time to ourselves. And so my morning routine is I envy you and I want to be you and I want to work I want to work towards I shouldn't say that I do try, but I need to be more consistent. So you're helping to convince me about this. Um, but I like that you don't just let it go because then when you just let it go, I know for me at least, I feel frazzled when I don't get any time to myself and when I don't get to do just a little bit of self care. And in my morning, typically, I would love to. I always do devotions in the morning, and sometimes it is just as quick as reading. Like I get them emailed to me sometimes, and sometimes it's just as easy as reading one of the devotions that is sent to me, which usually takes 5 minutes maybe. And I also like to do some writing in the morning too. But when I can't do at least the devotions part, I do feel very frazzled. So I like that you are making sure that even if it's a very shortened, it's not in an hour and a half, but it's a very shortened 10-minute, that you're still making that time for yourself. I think that's really admirable that you do that.
Well, thank you. It's very intentional on my part because I've done a lot of study on habit formation and how that works. And what happens is this: not only you mentioned when you skip it, you feel frazzled, and that's definitely one part of it. We notice like, oh, my day's just not the same. But it's really easy, and we all know this from our lives, to fall out of a habit. And so what
Mhm.
I'm doing is cementing in that habit. Even if I can't do
Mm.
it to the full expression of what I want it to be, I'm saying I am a person who does yoga every day. I read scriptures
Mm.
every day. And it's just keeping that habit. So it's kind of a placeholder, even though, I read a verse of scripture and I didn't feel this amazing spiritual uplift that I hope to feel every morning. I still did it. So it's just
Mhm.
the process of doing really helps us to keep going.
I think that's so true. And when you do make things a habit, it just becomes part of your day. I mean, it
Yes.
is a priority, but then it's just part of your day on top of that too.
Yes.
Just like when you brush your teeth and whatever you do before bed. So I was going to ask you this down the road, but I'm so curious right now because you do a lot of your children. Four of them are a little bit older and a little bit more self sufficient, but I know you do have a 2-year old. And for me, I have a 5.5-year-old who really is, I wouldn't say he's self sufficient, but he can take care of himself to an extent. It wouldn't bother me if I were trying to do something. But my 3-year-old just wants to be by mommy all the time. But he also is kind of inconsistent with his wake up time still. And sometimes he wakes up during the night still. So, for those of us who have small children, and I know you've been through, you mentioned, you started this routine when your older kids were little because you needed that time for yourself. So, what are your thoughts about getting all this to work? Maybe if we do have little kids at home.
Yeah. So my first thought is sometimes people, because I used to train on this and work with people to set up their morning routines. And some people would say, okay, I have a 6-month old and he's still waking up in the night, but I really want to have a good morning routine. And I would say, you really need sleep. That is your
Yeah.
priority right now. Yeah, have a morning routine, but have a morning routine where, okay, when I'm nursing the baby, I will read scripture. It needs to be, you need to
Yeah.
prioritize sleep because that is just, sleep is super important. Um, but beyond that is, to get help. So if you have a husband, definitely take advantage of that and say, okay, my husband and I had to negotiate this because for a long time he went to work and I stayed home and I would just handle all the morning stuff. And so we had to renegotiate to say, okay, I need some time in the morning. And he's like, but I have to get ready for work. He's wonderful. Don't get me wrong. I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
bagging on him here, but he's like, how could I possibly? And I'm like, I just know you can because like when I get ready, the kids are literally climbing on me. So it'll work. And
Mhm.
he had to figure out how this worked for him. And he has, and he's stepped up to the plate and it's been wonderful. But so that's one thing, is to get help. And so when the kids get up before their allotted 6:45 time, my husband will take them and help them, get them, whatever. The older kids can handle themselves, like you said, but get them, the little one, milk or whatever he might need. um, and then another thing is just the flexibility of, okay, if this is, say I know I need exercise in the morning, then my routine is to do yoga when I can. But if the kids are awake, I will load them in the stroller and we will walk around the block. So having a backup
Mhm.
plan, and the more you plan for, whatever's going to happen, the more you plan that backup, the more you're able to be consistent because it doesn't throw you off. You don't say, oh no, now I can't do anything. No, now we're on to plan B and I know exactly what that is. And so this is still going to happen.
I love that. I love that having a backup plan, I think, and just that what you mentioned is that that gives me, it makes me feel like I have some grace in this too, and that I can have my ideals and this is what I'd like to accomplish. But if I don't, it's really okay. And maybe I can incorporate it at other times during the day, or maybe I can even incorporate the kids into it. That's happened with me. I used to try to exercise before my kids woke up. But for me, like I said, with the inconsistent sleep schedules, I did need to prioritize sleep. So I love that you said that, because I think that's so essential for our health in
Yes.
general. I mean, sleep beyond everything else. So, so then I just kind of stopped working out in the morning, but I do like to exercise at home, like as do you. And so now my youngest is a little bit, more mature, and he can even sit in the same room when I'm doing like a DVD or something. And I love that you do YouTube.
Yeah.
That's such a great tip. That's a great tip. Yeah. So just doing it later in the day, I think is really helpful too. So I think that's important to note, that we can be flexible. I like your tips of you can condense your morning routine, and that you can also be just sort of flexible with the timing of it, and how it plays out in your world.
Yes. And one
So
more quick
yeah.
thought on that is
Yeah.
another thing that I've helped moms to do is when they, like you said, so say your 2 year old or your 3 year old gets up in the middle of the night and you're exhausted in the morning, it can be helpful to have a 2-part morning routine. So here's what I do in the morning when I'm tired and, the kids are up with me. But the second part happens either when they take a nap, if you're still lucky enough to have kids have nap
Mhm.
time, or during the kids' quiet time, or you make your own quiet time and you say, this is their screen time. They are going to sit here in front of the
Yeah.
TV and I am going to go do what I need to do to be my best self. And so a morning routine, it's a loose term, right? Of the word morning. It could be whenever that happens for you. So being flexible in that way too.
Yeah. And bravo for saying that sometimes screen time is just fine.
Yeah.
Because we do it here too. My oldest likes his iPad. My youngest has one, but he doesn't, typically tend to look at it too much. But he will watch a program on television, and I think that's important to note, is that we can use that to our advantage, and it's not going to destroy their minds if
Right.
they have a little bit of screen time. So I really like that too. Now, let me ask you, is there anything that you do the evening before? So, kind of like in preparation for your morning, what does your evening kind of look like
Yeah.
to get ready?
So first, because I get up at 5:15, I'm usually in bed by 9:30. So I go to bed
Okay.
pretty early. I once heard that the Dalai Lama gets up at 4 a.m. And you think,
Oh my.
wow, he's like superhuman. How does he do that? Well, guess what? He goes to bed at 7 p.m. So there you have it. You need to prioritize sleep. So, whatever that means for you, but don't expect to have a good morning if you're going to bed at 2 a.m. Morning's just coming too soon.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing, is sleep. And then another thing is whatever you need, you don't want to be scrambling for in the morning. So for me, I have this all set up in different areas of my house. And when I talked through my morning routine, I was telling you, like, I have literal places. So in the living room, on the little end table, I've got my journal, I've got my the books that I want to read. I've got all the things set out and they are there, and pens are there and everything that I need. So I'm not like, oh no, where's a pen? Where's a highlighter? How do I do this? No, it's there. And then the YouTube, if almost all the time I pull it up before I go to sleep. If not, I can type in YouTube really quick, but I have on YouTube a watch later list. So even that is
Mm.
all ready for me. YouTube does that super easy. Just go in a time when you have time, choose 20 videos, and then they're there and you do the first one. And so to me, you want to take as many decisions out of the morning as you can. So whatever your morning routine looks like, you maybe want to lay out clothes ahead of time. You maybe want to put your workout shoes by the door. Whatever you want to accomplish, you want to set up your environment to help you accomplish that, so that you're not getting derailed by spending an extra 10 minutes looking for something. Because in the morning, that time is precious. And so that really counts and can throw you off. And like, well, now that I spent 10 minutes trying to find the perfect yoga video to do, now
Mhm.
I don't have 10 minutes to do yoga. So just really being intentional ahead of time. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can be very simple, but you still know so that you're not making that decision in the morning.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense to me that, just prepping, even those things that you might think, "Oh, that would only take a few minutes in the morning." Well, every minute
Yeah.
counts because you're under the gun for, to get it all done in time. Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. Um, so all morning routines might look different for different people, and it just depends on the things that they're interested in or whatever those big rocks are for them. But in general, what are some top habits that you might recommend adding to our mornings? If we don't have a morning routine, what are some things that, and maybe these are things you might have already mentioned, but what are some things that you think might be beneficial to add to our morning
No,
routines?
I think this is a great question because I think some people might hear this and say, yoga, that's not for me. Like, I don't want to do
Yeah.
this. And then, not interested, don't need a morning routine. But the truth is, there are principles here. And I think that one of the big ones is stillness and quiet. So for me, I get that through yoga. I like a moving meditation, but that might look like a still, what we think of as meditation, sitting in a meditation pose on a meditation chair or listening to a guided meditation. Or it might be something as simple as having a cup of herbal tea where you
Mhm.
are holding the warm cup and it's a ritual and that's all you're doing. Why that's important? It's important to have that stillness of mind and to allow for your mind to kind of wake up and allow that stillness in your day. And for me, what that does is it builds kind of a reservoir, I like that word, of calm
Mm.
for later, because what I'm doing is I'm replenishing that well of calm and of peace. And that's what I draw from the entire rest of the day. And then I also think something where you learn. So for me, I prioritize spiritual learning, but for other people, if that's not, your thing, then maybe you're reading a business book, you're reading something, but you're opening your mind, and then those thoughts and those things that you are learning, those are with you all day, and those come back to you throughout your day like, oh yeah, I learned that this morning and I'm going to apply it in this way, and connections start to be made throughout your day. And then the third thing that I'd say for that's important to include is creative. So our brains in the morning time, a lot of times because we've just slept, and while we sleep, our brains are making connections. They're connecting all the learning, and everything that happened before is being connected. And so when we wake up, sometimes things are a lot clearer to us, what we need to have happen either in our personal lives, or for me with, writing. I want to make sure that I spend some time being creative and getting that on paper. That might not be writing for other people. That might be art. That might be planning your kid's birthday party. That might be, coming up with
Mhm.
fun ideas in your family. But whatever that is, that creative time, that's a good time to maybe get the juices flowing.
Mm. That I like the concept of that our brains are making connections while we're sleeping. And I think that is so true. Have you ever maybe been pondering something, or something is really bothering you and you have a lot on your mind, and then you wake up in the morning and you kind of have a solution, for it. I think that just it shows that our brains can reset overnight, and sometimes those problems can be solved just by sleeping on it, and then going through and writing those things out in the morning, I think is just a wonderful thing to do. That's when I like to do most of my writing if I can. And Chanel, I think I remember hearing on your podcast that this is how you were able to pen so many books is just because you have this morning routine. You've had,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, I just take a little bit of time every morning and I know
yeah.
ahead of time what I'm going to do. So I've outlined a chapter and then I bust it out.
Mhm.
In my short amount of time, I just
Yeah.
write my chapter and then done.
That seems so freeing for me too, because sometimes, whether I'm writing just things up for the podcast, or if I'm writing on my blog, or I'm working on an ebook, um, sometimes I get overwhelmed, but just knowing that I have X amount of time, and I'm a big on making a to-do list too. So I like in the morning just to be able to cross that off, but sort of planning it ahead of time and knowing, okay, I have 15 or 20 minutes and this is what I'm going to work on today. Because when we can just chip away at work like that, then it does all sort of come together finally. We don't have to
Yes.
worry about that big picture, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, there's a quote that goes along so perfectly with that. And I don't have it in front of me, but it talks about when you are, when a man is chipping away or hammering into stone to chip away at the stone. And the first 100 hammer, they hit and they hit and they hit and nothing happens. And then the 100th time, everything crumbles and all of a sudden you see what they were doing, but it isn't the 100th time that makes it happen. It's the 99 times before
Mm.
that. And so that is what a morning routine is. It's just consistency and you don't see it right away. And it's just doing a little every day, every day, every day. And then boom, you can look back and like, whoa, look at what I've accomplished. Look at what this morning routine has done for me in terms of accomplishment, but also in terms of self-development. Look who I've become through this practice of doing this every day. And it is powerful.
That sure is. I think you've absolutely convinced me that I need to make this a priority. So I am going to prioritize sleep. I'm going to give myself grace if I don't get through everything on my morning routine, but I am also going to categorize it in the way I love the big rock picture. And the ideas that you've given us. So stillness, because I will be honest, this is a terrible habit that I have. I look at my phone right away. And that is a terrible way to make you go crazy. And that does not bring stillness and calm to your mind. So I think maybe I'll need to look into one of those. What did you call the light that comes, the
Yeah, a
dawn
dawn
light?
simulator or a wake up light.
Dawn
Mm-hmm.
Okay, dawn simulator. I may need to do that because my alarm is on my phone, and so I'm automatically picking it up. But I either need to do an alarm clock or the dawn simulator. I like that. And so that's going to be my goal, is to not look at my phone until I have gone through my morning routine. So having that stillness. I do like devotion, so that would be that could be part of it, but also part of the learning. Like you said, there are a lot of books. I'm just like kind of a book junkie, so I have books piled up that I like to read. So maybe making a little bit of time for one of the books that I'm reading currently, and then like we mentioned, just the writing and in that whole analogy of just chipping away at the rock and just rather than overwhelming myself with, oh, I have to accomplish all these things, just putting one little task in front of me, and I'm going to work on that today. So you've really inspired me today,
I'm
Chanelle.
so glad.
Yeah, I love that. So are there any, just to sort of wrap it up, are there any projects or anything that you're currently working on your end?
Yeah, so I am working on developing myself as a speaker. So if anyone's looking
Oh,
for a speaker, let me know. I want to get in front of people and see people, and I feel like I love podcasting. It's an
mhm.
awesome medium, but I also want to see the people who I'm talking to sometimes instead of being alone in my room like I am right now. So that's the project that I'm working on currently.
I love it. So if you are looking, first of all, I want to tell you to subscribe to Chanelle's podcast, Moms Who Know. She just does such a great job. She has some guests occasionally, and then she also does some podcasting on her own too. But it's such a great resource out there. So definitely go to that. And then also, if we are looking to connect with you, maybe we want you to come to an event to speak, or if we're just wanting to follow you, where can we find you?
Yeah, so the podcast is the best place. And then I am on Instagram and Facebook at Moms Who Know Podcast.
Okay. And do you have a website as well,
Yes,
Chanelle,
and that
or
is
is it okay?
momswhoknowpodcast.com. So pretty easy.
Oh,
They're
oh,
all
that's
Moms Who
great.
Know Podcast.
That makes it very easy for
Yes.
us. So thank you. Well, I really appreciate you being here. I know I've gotten a lot out of this interview today, and I think our listeners will be really enjoying it too. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's it for today. For more from Kim, go to kimmaravich.com. For more from Lori, go to simplyempoweredllc.com. We're always open to listener questions or suggestions for the show. You can email those to contact@awholenewyou.podcast.com. We'd also love it if you joined our Facebook community and followed us on Instagram. Just search for A Whole New You Podcast. And if you'd be so kind as to leave us a review in iTunes, we'd really appreciate it so that more people can find our show and join our community. We'll see you next week.